Hello and welcome to this special discussion on something very sensitive, that is an understanding of religion and faith, or religion and sect. Why this is important is because it comes from a standard preaching or teaching which is not in practice. Every method says that the ultimate goal or realization is to reach a whole. That whole does not find a definition of color, of picture, of size, of shape, of voice, of texture, of any form. And that whole, that one, that universal idea has been termed as God. I personally am to be identified in the modern world as a Hindu, though in my personal view, Hindu is a sectarian idea. I am a Sanatan. The Vedic version, the Vedic belief system, identifies God as a whole and says Nirvikar, Nirakar, which means it does not have a shape, it cannot have an altered identity of it. You cannot put it into any imagery to say that this is God. But since I use the word Hindu before I pick on any other religions to be called, which I call as sects, I would pick on Hindu as a sect itself. I'm not going to talk about the numbers that are often known in the context of Hindu thought, Hindu belief system, as gods and goddesses. But the idea of a god and a goddess itself is divisionary. It is not God. But the freedom that Sanatan lends you is of imagining God to your convenience in all those many number of forms. And it could be a tree in a forest, it could be fire, it could be sky, it could be water, it could be the invisible air, it could be the earth. And you identify them in not only as forms of worship, you identify them as role models, you look up to them for a certain behavioral character, and that imagery that you create, you picture it as a god. Sanatan allows you to identify your own faith in different forms. You could imagine a mixed face, a mixed character of a being, wherein you could have something of an idea, having a head of an elephant or a head of a lion, the rest of the body of a human, and that lends a certain piece of character to that imagery. That character, that imagery defines your thought process, your belief, how you believe something could be overcome, something could be undone, some idea that troubles you could be undone. Does that really come along? Does that idea really fructify into the one, the whole, the image, the idea of a god? Perhaps for you it may, or otherwise at the other end of life, which is termed as salvation, you may realize that it is not. Interestingly, the Vedic system talks of different stages of life and different intermediaries of life. Mathematically, it is the last stage of sannyas wherein the description is such that people imagine that they will leave their families and society and talk of renunciation and go to a certain place, and then they will ultimately lose their life and get into the folds of God. That doesn't really happen. Because renunciation is an idea again. It does not really say that you have to move away from the world. What it means is you become detached. Things around you should not affect you. This is what today's all the meditation coaches, all the lifestyle coaches, all the spiritual coaches talk about. That let things go. Don't be attached to them. Don't hold on to them that if not this, then what? The flawed idea of running behind numbers, juggling between numbers, be it the economic numbers, financial numbers, or the arithmetics of education. And it has percolated so deep into our thought that young children who are just putting their shoes into a school right from that age, till the point that you die, you are number crunching. You are not letting things go, you are not letting things happen. And you're building on things upon you as a pressure, as a stress, as an idea that is going to hurt you. And it does. Takes various forms of metabolic diseases, takes various forms of psychiatric diseases, takes various forms of illness, of social unrest. But that is not religion again. What has happened to the most advanced animal or most advanced living being in this universe? Advanced because he has supposedly an intellect, a brain that defines his thought, his actions. What has happened to it? Has evolution, has technology taken him away from being explorative? Has it put him into a tight jacket of imagery, which just does not go beyond a certain perspective? And then he starts finding ways and means and methods across. The Hindu faith, Hindu belief system is so rich that it allows you to imagine, to have that picture, to develop that imagery in various forms. And you cultivate a faith around it, you follow it. The freedom is such that out of the 7 days of the week, you could give each day to one deity or two deities. And the numbers are so big that if all through your life, all single day of your life, you were worshipping one of them, you would still not be able to worship every single deity that is listed. That freedom, that idea, that expanse allows you to be what you say that you are a Hindu. The Hindu belief system gives way to 3 primary sects: Shaivs, Vaishnavas, Shakts. Imagine nations. Shaivs are to be considered those who believe in a system where they identify with a imagery that allows them destruction. Vaishnavas, they come from a system where they are allowed to be creative, to give space to an executive function. Sharks are symbolic of the feminine powers which range between the care of a mother to being an ultimate destroyer in the form of Kali. And each of these images, each of these versions of thought allow a certain kind of a breed of humans to follow a certain kind of path that will help them achieve salvation. But all these paths, they take you to only one, and that one does not have a shape or anything. The same applies to other religions. Islam, Christianity, Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists. Some of them have picked up a culture of having images or portraits or statues of their belief system, and some have not. But each of them follows a certain idea. Now, why I'm stressing upon this whole point of idea, of a particular idea, a particular method, is because what happens with this is you are not prepared to accept an alternative to it. The idea that you cannot deviate from this thought, you cannot deviate from this method of thinking, the idea that you cannot go away from this method of practice, and the ingrained teaching that if you defy this thought, then you are an atheist or you are not part of a certain community. The idea of loneliness, the fear of being left out, that is what is surviving these faith systems in their worst forms. The breeding of the idea, the nurturing of the thought that if you deviate from this, this is wrong, is haywire. Even coming to the Vedic interpretation of the psychiatric idea of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas is completely haywire when it comes to the observations and interpretations by the so-called public faces of sainthood. Because all three are important. They are all a part of the same human being, of the same universe, and if the context of Ved or Ayurveda particular was to be taken, it says that the same individual has all three in him. And at different points, at different stages of life, each becomes important. To define that a certain kind of food, certain kind of dressing, a certain kind of behavior is what is the ultimate requisite is completely incorrect, because the other two are also a part and they are also equally important at different times. To say that a certain kind of food or a certain kind of clothing will define a certain kind of thought can be reversible. That a certain kind of thought can define a certain kind of food and certain kind of clothing. It is interchangeable, interrelated. You cannot put it into a straitjacket. You cannot become the idea of a group. The moment you become the idea of a group, the moment you have followers, the moment you have people running behind you, chasing you for that idea, for that salvation, and you start thinking that yes, you are the one who are going to render them out of their miseries, and you try to pose yourself to be becoming a god, you become a god man. From being just another person exploring this whole journey from birth till the end of life to achieve salvation and end up into that hole where nothing matters, you start imagining that you are one of the whole. That is what sectarianism is. That is what divisionary is. That is what faith is. Sanatan allows you the freedom to choose between a thoughtful idea of Bhagavad Gita, an impersonation of an ideal man suited for executive functions as Ram. It also gives you the mystical, chivalrous, Casanovistic idea of a person in the form of Lord Krishna, And you imagine yourself, or you are kind of quoted at different stages of life as among those imageries. Often we hear parents or relatives or people around you, when your kids, quoting you as Kanha, another name synonymous for Lord Krishna, the same chivalrous, playful thought. Or when you are a matured person living a household or leading an organization or leading the nation, you're often quoted to be impartial and trying to draw parallels and equivalence with Lord Ram. Or as a woman, you are compared in different forms, in different ways, in different methods with whether it is Sita or Parvati or any of the other anecdotal names of the goddess of Shakti. So, no one knows whether they existed or not. To say that there were findings of this person and that person, and you have Adwarika or you have anything else coming up, they point to something existing in those ages. But there is no DNA testing to prove that either of those things existed. There must have been some reflection. The writer, the composer of those thoughts definitely must have come across something that gave him the idea of defining something as Ram, something as Krishna, something as another person, or the mystical characters that we know. But we really cannot say that they existed or not. But yes, that gives or raises two pertinent questions. Either in those times there was somebody who was an exact opposite mirror image of these thoughts. There might have been a completely unruly ruler or a completely unruly person who did not have any respect for the society, for his parents, for his wife, for his kids, as a ruler, not for his people. And then there was an imagination that, in contrast, if there was a person like Lord Ram, and that is why he is Lord, that is why those who have faith in Ram would treat him as God, that the ideal opposite mirror image, right to left and left to right, would be this. Or there might have been a child too simple to be acknowledged to be a child. And there was an imagination that this which should be in contrast something like this, a playful, chivalrous person. The idea also allows you to exclude gender. You have your gods and goddesses transforming into the other gender, playing with gender roles. There's no straight jacket that defines your faith into a particular kind of a role, that this is a man and this is a woman. They could transgress those identities, they could transgress those boundaries and see themselves in another role. You have anecdotes listed in various literature of the faith, wherein they talk of imagining themselves in those roles, be it Lord Shiv, be it Lord Krishna. So, these things are nowhere different from the other religions that we talk, because be it Islam, be it Christianity, be it Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists, or anyone else, they are guided by a certain set of principles, a certain thought, which says that if you follow this, you will reach the ultimate. And so does the practice of Shaiv or Vaishnav or Shakt or any other Hindu faith. They all talk of reaching and realizing the Sanatan. The modern thing of spirituality coaches, life coaches, meditation coaches is not doing anything different. And to be very precise, you don't need a particular hymn, you don't need a particular verse, you don't need a particular line to be used to achieve that salvation, that has the power to help you concentrate onto a certain thing, and that concentration takes you away from the rest of the thing. It allows you to develop a practice of letting things go, letting things happen. Meditation allows you to realize your strengths and your weaknesses. It allows you to build on your strengths, to overcome your weaknesses by finding alternative paths. And in life, there is a time when you reach the ultimate path, the ultimate goal. And standing on the sands of time, where if there was a life after death, you on those sands will see a person next to you from another faith, who you may have identified as another Hindu, or you may have identified him as a Muslim, a Christian, or any other religion to say. But standing on the sand, each one of you will realize that you face the ultimate, which does not have any form, any color, any shape, any texture, any voice. That oblivion, that silence, that singularity and yet plurality of approach defines the whole, the one, the God. And that one, that whole, that God, that oblivion, that infinite state, to say the infinity, is what spirituality is about, is what God is about. It is not in Ram, it is not in Muhammad, it is not in Jesus, it is not in the saints of Sikhism or Jains or any other religions of the world. It is all in that one. And each of these saints, each of these gods, each of these goddesses, each of these lords, they told you in their own verses how you could reach this one, this whole, this singular idea of a whole. They never said that you will reach me. They never said that they will be the ones who you will find standing on these sands of time. They themselves presented themselves to be one seeking this whole. They have themselves been picturized as being mortals and coming to an end in their lives. So if they were mortals, they couldn't be gods. Yes, they could be closest to gods because they were near perfect. But they had their own flaws, which they needed to overcome through a life that they led. That's very much clearly written in their own biopic forms of narrations in various literature of various faiths. But there is no literature, there is no narration which is universal to this one single universal identity, infinity. Every model allows you to picture him in eternity in any form that you want to. Perhaps tomorrow, today's icons may become gods of tomorrow. And in another century, those gods may assume another significance of worship. And that would add to the numbers of gods and faiths and beliefs. That is what happens with human belief system, the idea of man seeking for a support, for something around him, that lends him that courage, that yes, I can be something like this. So you want to identify a role model for yourself. Why not search for one within? Meditation, spirituality allows you to explore that role model in you. It allows you to tell you, find you, discover yourself as to what you want to be, as to what you can be, as to who you are. And the more you explore yourself, the more depth of exploration you do for yourself, you realize your own weaknesses, how empty, how hollow your personal beliefs could have been. Not that they were wrong, but they were just partial. And to make it full, you needed more. More of educating yourself, about how you see the world, or you should see the world, or you could see the world, and what else you could do, or what else you should do, or what else you would do in certain situations. And that could always be the one path which would be less traveled. That could always be one path which may not have been taken by another one. And over a distance run, you will find yourself again lonely. But meandering through those forests, or through that path, ultimately you will stand on the same sands of time, where somebody else will come from another path, from another forest, and the realization will be the same, the one universal being. Therefore, look for the religion in you, look for the tolerant one in you. Make no distinction, make no difference between the other one next to you, in faith, in practice, in looks, in what he eats and what he wears, in how he presents himself, how he wants to talk to you. The day you start doing that, you would be practicing a religion. And until then, that you do not practice this, you shall be practicing a faith, a belief. That would be the day when you would have achieved sainthood, sannyas, to say, closest to God, closest to infinity. But until then, you will just be another mortal trying to seek an idea of salvation. Thank you.